Hello, everyone. We're delighted to have you join us for today's session of ACB Connects. We're also excited to welcome our international guests who are watching this session in rebroadcast through an ACB partnership with Keith Kelly and the Global Band Room. I'm Susan Sands, President of ACB, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to this, the first in a multi-session series on virtual collaborations. During this seemingly endless season of separation from our bands, we found ourselves looking for ways to give hope and encouragement to our musicians, ways to keep the band together and to motivate our members, and ways to stay engaged with our community. One answer for many bands has been virtual collaboration. In today's session, you will be guided through the initial steps in planning for virtual collaborations. The ACB team will present topics ranging from music selection, with insights into the role of the music director, copyright considerations, how to get the necessary rights for print and synchronization, and including the technical aspects for launching the project, creating files for the musicians, and suggested guidelines for recording at home. ACB Connects is sponsored by the Association of Concert Bands, an international nonprofit organization whose mission is to foster excellence in concert band music through performance, education, and advocacy. Our membership includes concert community bands, band directors, individual members, student members, and corporate members. Everyone who cares about concert bands is welcome. Today's session is presented as a service to our members and as an outreach to the music community. Just a few words of instruction before I introduce today's presenters. For optimal audio, everyone except the presenters has been muted. ACB Connects is being recorded. Today's session will be archived along with the other previously recorded sessions and can be accessed from the ACB Connects page on the ACB website. And finally, today's session will allow for interactive questions during the discussion after each of the presenters. If you have any questions or comments, please share these in the chat, and as many as possible will be addressed. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome and to introduce today's presenters, Tom Seaton, Sarah Mcelfresh, and Scott Hosner. Tom Seaton has been the music director of the Rancho, Cordova, River City Concert Band since 2003. He is a clarinetist and has been a music educator since 1990. He is currently teaching 7th through 12th grade music at Creative Connections Arts Academy in North Highlands, California. Tom's band hosted the ACB convention held in Rancho, Cordova. He has been a member of the ACB Convention Committee, helping to design, create, and launch ACB Connects presentations. Tom will be discussing the director's role and sharing his insight into what has worked with virtual recordings. Sarah Mcelfresh is the National Membership Chair for ACB, as well as the Webmaster and Chair of the Young Composers Competition contest. She currently plays the euphonium with a Peninsula concert band in the Hampton Roads region of Virginia. She's been involved with community bands in several states for almost 40 years. She started by carrying the banner in parades at a young age before becoming a musician. Sarah also founded the Heart of Virginia Community Band in Central Virginia with her husband, Scott. Sarah will present the issue of copyright permission for virtual projects. Scott Hosner is a trombone player in the Rancho, Cordova, River City Concert Band and produces all of their virtual performance projects. He grew up in Sacramento, California, and currently works for the state of California as a healthcare educator and analyst. His hobbies include 3D animation and music performance, which have lent greatly to the success of his band during the pandemic. Scott will be addressing the technical issues of getting started on a virtual project. Our moderator for today is Gail Brechting. Gail is president-elect for the Association of Concert Bands and the music director of the West Michigan Concert Winds. Now it's time to hear from our presenters, so I turn the program over to our moderator, Gail Brechting.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing all of the things today about making these virtual recordings. So we'll get right into it. Let's start with Tom Seaton. He's going to talk about music selection, and he's going to talk about director insights into doing virtual recordings. Welcome, Tom.
Welcome. It's really good to be here, and it's been a pleasure to be part of the committee that's been helping to put these on. And I feel very blessed to be part of a band that has been able to do so much during this pandemic. It's really been fun. So I'm going to be sharing some slides with you, and I hope that they will be beneficial for you. So it's interesting as it started, you maybe noticed the title that it was mostly going to be about music, but as I sent this survey out to the directors, it was interesting to find out that their role went way beyond, just choosing music for their bands to perform. And so I decided to expand a little bit and cover some of the other topics as well. But we're going to start with music selection and how to go about choosing a selection. And you'd think it'd be easy. We'll just, pull something from the repertoire that we're already doing and just, go ahead and play it. Well, a lot of bands are playing, some pretty high level music, and a lot of us will be playing pieces that might be, 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8, measures long, or be in multiple movements or whatever. And one of the first things we found out is that, and what many directors said was to keep the selection short, to keep it, at 5 minutes maximum. And most of the pieces that my band has been doing have even been shorter than that. And there's some reasons for that'll come up. The other thing is to think about your band members. It's really important to do that, because if you have a band like we do that has varying levels of expertise in your members, you need to make sure that the selection is going to be something that they can easily handle. Because what's going to happen is there's a whole different thing that goes into putting a camera in front of yourself and making recordings, when you're not used to doing that, or maybe have never done that in your life. And so making sure the selection is something that can be easily handled is going to help, because if they can easily play the selection, then that's going to be take away maybe some of the stress of recording themselves. So really think about your membership and what they're going to be able to handle. And then also try to use a selection that has a minimal or even better no tempo changes. So if you're doing a march that just goes completely through at the same tempo, that's going to be great. And that's kind of almost the way we started. In fact, we started with just warm-ups, and thought, okay, let's see if we can at least try and do this, and then have expanded from there. And we've done a couple of things that have had tempo changes, and other groups have as well. But there's more that needs to go into that, as far as the director who might need to put an actual conducting video together for members to follow, and that sort of thing. But for those of you just getting started, choosing that selection that's going to be short and something that the band can easily handle is going to be crucial. And then think about considering a theme for your production. Even if it's just if you're doing things, once a quarter, or just a couple of concerts a year. If you're just going to do a winter concert, I know a lot of groups are working on a spring concert right now. Maybe choose a theme for that. And I know that's really helped in the production end for, especially for our band, that really expanded beyond some of the things that other groups have been doing. And so, it's been fun for us to create a theme. We did Mary Poppins Returns, and took a couple excerpts from there. And so it was real easy to put together production for that. This last month, we actually did, we wanted to talk about Black History Month and wanted to feature an African American composer, and so we did that. And so a theme can really help your overall production. And then if you want to avoid any copyright issues, you might consider looking for selections that are already in the public domain. So a lot of marches, there are a few websites that you can go to that already have, and a lot of you probably know those of you that are directors that can go in and you can already see these pieces that are already in the public domain that you can readily get copies to and be able to use. So that's some things on choosing a selection. And then one of the other topics that came up was how to guide your band members. Most conductors found that they were doing more, like I said, than just choosing the music. So one of the things that if there are tempo changes, it really helps to have a clear click track subdividing the beats where the tempo change is occurring. So especially for any retardandos or accelerandos. That'll obviously be up to whoever's putting that together, for you putting that click track together. But whatever can help there again, whatever can help your members feel confident in what they're doing is really going to be beneficial. And then after a fermata, make sure that you have kind of a new click track going into the new tempo. That's really going to help, solidify that tempo for afterwards. And then as a conductor, you can help by talking to your members through the changes on the click track. So you might consider having like a Zoom rehearsal for those members that are involved. Have them all join you on Zoom, and you can actually maybe even conduct through things, or you can talk them through those tempo changes. So anything you can do to help them feel more confident in what they're doing. And then encourage your members to practice with the click track recording, and maybe even do a Zoom rehearsal with them. So I mentioned that, but practicing to that click, recording before they record themselves would be very beneficial. And then also sharing a how-to for them to follow in recording their videos. And so that a lot of the directors found that was kind of their role, was getting this material out to their members, as well as just the music. And then there was some logistics to consider. And it was fun to hear from these directors, because I was going, yep, that's exactly what I've been doing as well. So one of the things that came across a lot was setting up a calendar. When is the music going to go out? When are the deadlines going to be for the recordings to be due? And when the production will be released. For a while for us, it was just, we're done, let's just get it out there. And then it became, well, let's see if we can coordinate more with the city that we perform for, and see if they'll help us, get that out by email so that other people can hear it. And then we got more into, when are we going to premiere it? When are we going to get this out? And, when would be a good date to do that? And so it's been kind of fun to see the progression for us, but also for other bands, I think, in how they've put those deadlines together to make it, kind of make it the most useful and really the most fun. And then you might need to set up a budget. If you feel that your band would need to pay for editing of the virtual recording, for someone to do audio or video or whatever, then you might need to consider a budget for that. So that was one of the things that also came up. And then obtaining permission for music distribution and for the recorded performance. That's the other thing that directors have been pretty involved with. So those are some of the logistics. And then another thing that came up was tuning. We're so used to rehearsals, right? We get going and we tune as an ensemble, and then we get going. So what happens for a virtual recording? One of the conductors had talked about, having your members make sure they're tuning before they record, and make sure that they're in tune to the recording they're listening to. So it's not really enough to go ahead and make sure your instrument's in tune, right? But when you're listening to yourself playing to that recording, being in tune with that recording, and it's off. And part of that is that it's going to save time and effort for those technicians that are mixing the audio. You know, there's a lot of things you can do with audio. You can kind of bump it up and down, you know, tune or tonality wise, so that things will be more in tune. And you can, you know, fudge some for some of the rhythm aspects. But the less that the technicians have to do for mixing the audio, the easier it's gonna be. So I thought that was a great consideration. And there were some questions that came in that I thought I would take the opportunity to answer before we get into a little Q&A section. So one of the questions was, if a piece has a tempo change, how can that be handled? Or is it best to choose a piece with a consistent tempo? Well, we already got that one answered. So yay, thank you to whoever submitted that one, because it was nice to see everyone come in and go, oh, we've already got some answers for that. So that one was good. And here was another one that came in. So what are flex pieces? Now can I find them? And I thought this was really a great question, because there are a couple of different things. There are flex pieces, and then there are what are called adaptable pieces. And so I thought I'd give some examples of both of those. So a flex band arrangement has instruments assigned to specific voice parts based on the range. Okay, so this type of ensemble requires at least one player available on each part. And here's an example of that. I don't know how well you might be able to see this or not. But it's arranged in parts. Okay, so just like it'd be like a vocal score almost. Most of them have 5 parts. This one just happened to have 4 parts. But you would have, like in part 1, you would have the flute, and then like first clarinet, first trumpet, violin, if you're including stringed instruments. The second part, clarinet, trumpet, and then alto saxes coming in for that second part. Third part, still being clarinet, but adding tenor sax to that. The alto voice, the second alto saxophone voice, you bring your horns in. And then the fourth part being your bass parts, your bass clarinet, euphonium, trombone, tubas. And then if there are 5 parts, the trombones are usually the ones that are taking over part 4, and then sometimes part 5. And then there again, it's one person on a part. Okay, if you have, well, it's not one person on a part, but you need at least one part being covered in order for the piece to sound. But that's kind of cool, because you can do some small ensembles as well with this type of arrangement. Okay, and then the adaptable, and these are becoming more and more popular. More and more composers are starting to do these. So adaptable band arrangements. So these arrangements are arrangements that have been composed and arranged into 4 voices, and scored so that each instrument in your ensemble can play any part. Okay, so you'd have a flute 1 through 4, French horn 1 through 4, etc. And they're usually percussion parts, optional percussion parts, optional piano parts, and then some of the pieces they're doing have electronics as well in the background, which has been a whole new thing that's been coming up. So an example of that, and this is a great example, and this is one of the things that Frank Kelly was really thinking about, because he knew of all the flex band stuff, but people started talking about, well, what if I only have 10 members? What if I only have 4 members that want to get together and play something? And so he took his Cajun folk songs, took the bell movement, and arranged it so that 4 flutes could play, or 4 clarinets could play, or it could be a clarinet ensemble. You could mix and match. So alto saxophone might have the lead line, flute might have the second line, clarinet might have the third line, bass clarinet the 4th line. So any members will be able to get together and actually play this type of arrangement, and not have to worry about the where in the flex band you've got those different parts. So this is really a way to go if you don't have a lot of members, or if you have members that really want to get into small ensembles and do some things. So I thought I'd clarify both of those, but you can look up those. A lot of Pepper has those, and a lot of other places. How often should we try to do a video collaboration, virtual recording? It seems labor intensive. Yes, it can be labor intensive for sure. And there again, it depends on who you have that might be, computer oriented, that can do a lot of the things that have been done. We, the Rancho Cordova River City Concert Band, got on a roll of doing one once a month, and we've been pretty consistent in that, and it's been fun for us to do. But some other considerations, really does depend on your band and what all you want to be able to do. For instance, we've just been doing, just a band collaboration. Other groups are doing small ensembles, various ensembles that are performing different things, and then their band doing one work together. But that way they've been able to produce it like an hour-long concert, where ours are only, between 2 and 4 minutes, and it's one arrangement that's going out once a month. So once a month, you might just do winter and spring, every other month, or once a quarter. So, and then are there companies that make provisions for members to download their parts after the ensemble pays for the arrangement? And Sarah's going to get into this probably a little bit more, but what we found was that you really do need to get permission from the publisher. Many will give you permission to scan and send individual parts out to members, but not a folder that has the score and all the parts. That's the real concern, because that can get out, and then, other people would have it, and hey, we got this arrangement, and you guys can, have it. And but some of that's going to be addressed. I think Sarah's going to address some of that. But what we found is it's really usually pretty easy to get permission. Most of the publishers have a place that you can go to be able to ask that type of permission. So are there any other questions that I can try and answer at this point?
Yeah, hi, Tom. I'm just keeping up with this, with the chat and various things, and you've hit on almost all of them. It's been fantastic. One of the questions was, is there a library software recommended out there for virtual concerts? And I think Scott will get into some of that, but I thought I'd ask you as the director as well.
Yeah, I think Scott might have more info on that. I haven't, I think, if you're looking really for those, those flex band and adaptable bands, there's a bunch of stuff out there. Some other composers are really focusing on quartets and different things and stuff now. So
okay, great, thank you. Another one that I didn't know if you were going to get into, but they asked about the actual recording of it, meaning do they have to have headphones and this kind of thing? They were wondering if that was something that you would speak about today.
Yeah, I can, and then I think Scott will cover it a little bit too. But okay, it really is. You need the basics of it is you need 2 devices. You need a device to be able to listen to the recording, and you would do that through earbuds or headphones. So you would listen to the recording, and then you're playing along to it. So that other device would actually be videotaping you. And and we've been able to use just our iPhones or our phones, and that's been fine. So.
Wonderful, thank you. And then lastly, there's a question here about what if a band member doesn't want to submit the video, but they just want to do the audio? Have you come up with anything for that?
The more the merrier. So I think doing the audio is great. Yeah, they might be camera shy or whatever, and it's kind of interesting because we do these public performances, where people are seeing your face and seeing you perform, and yet when it gets down to recording yourself, there's that, I'm not sure I want to do that. Right. And I find that with my students as well. Sure. So
yeah, I've even had a few students, or excuse me, a few of my band members who have said, I don't like listening to myself by myself on my video recording. And I thought that was really interesting because that kind of told me a few things.
Yeah,
I wonder how much they practice and listen to themselves, but
exactly.
it's pretty, but it's right there. It's not like they're listening and it goes away. It's there and they have to look at it. So,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, and it's different because when we're playing, we actually have that inner ear thing going on, that inner part going on. And then when you hear it, you know, it's like our
Right.
voice, right? We hear our voice back and it's like, whoa, that doesn't sound like me.
That's
So,
that's exactly
same thing.
right.
Yeah.
And then the last question is, are there any other things that you have done to help keep your band members engaged?
Yeah, that's wow, that is I think it's just a lot of encouragement. You know, we haven't had our full contingency of band members get involved, but those that have looked forward to it. And I think that's, you know, we kind of went into this saying, okay, whoever gets involved, and if it's, you know, if it's only a few, then it's only a few, and let's make the most of it. And we really have made the most of it. We've, you know, invited guests to our Zoom meetings that we have on Monday nights. And people are so willing to be part of what you're doing and want to be able to help out and encourage, that's become really fun, and that's become a motivation for us to be able to do more and continue going on. So
wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. This has been really helpful just to get people off the ground with trying to do some of these for sure. So thank you so much. We really enjoyed it. All right, we're going to move on now to listening to Sarah Mcelfresh. Sarah is going to discuss some really legal issues that you really, as an ensemble, it's sometimes you just do your concert and you walk away, you don't think about it. This is a really important part of what we are trying to do, not only virtually, but also with any concert that you would be doing. So we have taken it, ACB Connects, and have broken it down, and Sarah is got wonderful things to share with you today. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Gail. Hello, everybody. While Nancy is bringing up my slides for me, because I've been having some technical issues, I'm going to copy and paste some information into the chat. All of this is in my slides and will be available on the website when we're all done. But if you want to save the chat and have it before we get those posted, there it is for you. So to start off, what I'm going to be talking about today is the legal side, the copyright angle of things. And this first slide is an overview. And Tom kind of set me up for some of these things. But as most of us know, music is protected by several different forms of copyright. And whatever project we're doing, we need to make sure we cover and get permission for the appropriate rights that we need. Not everything we do requires all the different types of rights. For these virtual collaboration pieces, the print rights and the synchronization rights are the most common ones that we need to get. There are some others if you get really fancy. So I'm going to talk about that process. And as Tom alluded to, and you need to get permission for whatever you're doing. There are also pieces where you don't need to get permission, and I'm going to give you some resources and explain how those fit into things. And the big thing with the rights that you need for these projects are that the copyright holder gets to choose whether to give you permission or not. There's no big clearinghouse like we have for the blanket performance license that many of our bands have to perform live music in concerts. We have this big blanket license that lets us do that. There isn't an equivalent for these types of rights because each copyright holder gets to choose whether or not they wish to grant permission. And they could give permission to one entity and not another, and they retain the right to do that. And so there's no clearinghouse, there's no set pricing scheme. Everyone gets to kind of do what they want, and so you have to go ask them. And many of you may be familiar with or heard some things about ASCAP and BMI having agreements with YouTube and Facebook and some other platforms, but those are the big two. Live streaming is a different thing entirely. Live streaming is where you set your camera up, you point it at your stage or your group of people playing, and you broadcast out to the world. And those that is something that ASCAP and BMI have worked out with YouTube and Facebook and others to live stream, and you don't need additional permission for that. But if you wish to put that recording out there later, then you do need other rights for that. And so that's just, live streaming is different than these virtual ensembles. So Nancy, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so first, what are these rights? What are print rights and synchronization rights? So the print rights refers to the actual physical music. And this is what says you cannot photocopy music, you cannot scan music. And so if you don't get permission to do that, don't scan your music and send it to everybody. Don't make photocopies. So you need to get that permission, and it's pretty easy to go through and asking that. Now, if your musicians already have the music you wish to do, you've already, everyone had that music in their folder last March when they went home after their last rehearsal, and something you were working on, well, they've got that original music. You don't need to go get the print rights for that. Or if you wanted to mail the originals or have people come pick things up from your front porch, as long as it's the original sheet music, you can bypass getting permission. It's when you want to scan and email is when you need to get permission. And then the synchronization rights is what is kind of at the heart of these video ensembles. That's taking music and putting sound and other video to it. And that is, that comes under the synchronization rights, because you are synchronizing music with imagery. And this is the same if you want to have a slideshow at a concert that's going along with what you're playing. You need the synchronization rights for that, whether it's you're producing a video for the world or just in your performance. Okay, so next slide. So the general process for seeking these permissions is actually pretty straightforward. You figure out who the copyright holder is, so you know who you need to get permission from. Then you ask them, and then you make sure you do whatever you agreed to do in that agreement for them granting you the permission. So we're going to step through some of these, but it's pretty straightforward. It does take a little bit of time, so you're not going to want to decide tonight that, oh, we want to do this and we want to do this brand new piece. You're not going to be able to on Tuesday send out music. You're going to need a little bit of time to have a back and forth with the copyright holder to get that permission. So Nancy, next slide. Okay, so how do you figure out who owns the copyright? The first thing to do is look at your music. At the bottom, it probably has the copyright notice, and it will tell you who the publisher is. And that's one way to figure it out. That's clear. It's definitely who owns the copyright to that piece. The other, if it's you don't have that, or maybe the publisher's been sold since you bought that music years ago, you can go and look at the BMI repertoire or the ASCAP Clearance Express databases. Each of them have these databases that have all the composers who are part of their association. And you can type in the composer, you can type in the name of the piece, and I have a screenshot from BMI and a screenshot from ASCAP here. And in addition to saying, the name of the piece and, the composer, there's a place where it says who the publisher is. Sometimes here it will even give you an email address or a specific person who is the contact for permissions for that piece. Sometimes, though, the information tied to an older piece may be a little out of date, as far as like if there's a very specific person listed, you're going to want to go to the next step that we're going to talk about. But these are the three easiest ways to figure out who that person is or that company is that you need to ask for permission. Next slide. So once you've figured out who you need to ask for permission, the best thing to do is to go to their website. And on the ACB website, we have links to many of the most common composers on our copyright page, direct to where they list their permissions or their licensing. But go to their website and look for links that say permissions or licensing. That's usually where it's labeled. And then, like, as I said before, everybody has can do it their own way. They may have different ways they want you to ask for permissions. Some may want you to just fill out a web form. Some may want you to send an email address, send a message to an email address. Everybody has a slightly different way in which they want that information. And it's best to go about asking for permission the way the publisher wants to be asked. You don't want to send an email to someone who, when their process is to go through all these forms that people have submitted via their website, because they've got their process. And so going about it a different way might slow things down. If you need to send an email, typically the websites say what they want, but in case they don't, the things you're definitely going to need is the title of the piece, the composer and arranger, your band, who are you, a little bit about what it is you want to do, what you are asking for permission for, and then when you hope to have your project ready for. And that last bullet there is proof of purchase. Pretty much everybody wants to know that you've paid for this piece at some point. Now, if the music's been in your library for 20, 30 years, most of the publishers are willing to have a conversation with you to try to figure that out. And it may be if you can't prove that you purchased the piece, that may change how much they want you to pay to give you permission. Some publishers are asking very little money for permission to give the permission. Some are charging a lot more. It really depends on the piece. It depends on the publisher. And so you just have to go through the process. And like I said before, if you're not finding information, or if you're not finding like a website for the publisher and you can't find the composer, you can go back and try the information that was on the ASCAP and BMI databases. They might, that might get you started. Next slide. So once you have had the back and forth with the publisher, if they did not give you permission to do the virtual recording or to scan the music for the project you want to do, you should pick a new piece. It's not, oh, I asked and they said, no, I'm going to do it anyway. You need to honor their request of not giving you permission. But if they do give you permission, make sure you do all the steps or things that are outlined for that permission. And again, since every publisher can do things their own way, there isn't a consistent, consistent thing that they all require. There's a lot of commonality, such as putting that permission was obtained into your final project, into that video on like in a credit slide, or maybe up front. They might have special notices they want you to put on the music you scanned. And as Tom alluded to, the most common one is that you can't, if they've given you permission to scan, is that you're not going to put all the music in a folder and say, here band, here it is, go get it. Because they don't want everything out there. It's that you're probably gonna need to individually email the music to each musician, or to like all the first clarinets can be on one email, that kind of thing. But that is something the publishers will likely tell you when they grant you permission. They will say, you need to do this. For those of you who may have participated in convention band in the past, you may have seen notices that said permission was granted by Hal Leonard and this piece must be destroyed. That is something that you may have to put on the music when you scan it. And if you do, sometimes that's easy to just type that up and print it out and kind of put it on your scanner so that it's on the music, or there are ways to notate PDFs, but that's, those are the types of things that a publisher might ask you to do once they've given you permission. Next slide. Okay, so as Tom mentioned, music in the public domain, it lets you not have to worry about these copyright issues. And currently, music that was written and has a copyright date prior to 1925 is in the public domain. You can take that music and you can do what you can do these projects without having to get other permission. But something to take note of is that a lot of marches in particular have been republished And if you are playing an arrangement that has been published more recently, that is not in the public domain. So you would need to go get permission, for example, to use the Breon and Chisel Manhattan Beach. But if you wanted to play Manhattan Beach, you could go to the Marine Band's website and go get the music from there. That is in the public domain because that is, they've taken it from the original, and the Marine Band is putting that music out there in the public domain. And so there are two sources here. As Tom mentioned, marches are, a lot of marches are in the public domain, and the Marine Band has pretty much got almost all of Sousa's marches are public domain. There's still a few that aren't, but there's a lot to choose from there to get going. And you also can listen to their recordings, and your band can become familiar with the piece if it's a march you've never played before. And then bandmusicpdf.org is another good source for getting public domain music. Then there's something called the Creative Commons licenses, which are a set of licenses that the composer, or pretty much any artist, but can apply to their works. There are several different versions of the licenses, but the ones for music, pretty much that a composer can add will let you do these virtual ensembles with their music. You'll want to read, there are a couple of different Creative Commons licenses that can be applied. So you want to just look at the details of what you're allowed to do. One place that composers who are putting their music out there for under these Creative Commons licenses are using the IMSLP library. And on there, on each page, it will say whether or not it is covered under, they also have a lot of public domain music, and it'll say whether the music's in the public domain or if it's covered under one of these Creative Commons licenses. And then you need to look at, what's required of you with the Creative Commons. Some of those have a specific way you need to attribute the work and say that permission was granted through that license. I noticed a question come up in the chat about international copyright. And again, yes, this is what I'm talking about is American copyright, though Creative Commons does have an international license. One of their versions is I think it's just dash international that an international composer could use to put on their music to allow it to be used in this way. I know that doesn't quite answer everything that was in the chat message, but I wanted to get that out there now. Next slide. So there are some other possible considerations for these projects. One of them is if you are using a audio recording that was commercially produced to go along with your project, you might need to get a master right. This is much more common in choral music, and a lot of music is being packaged now for choruses to include this right. Bands haven't quite gotten there yet, but if you're using a track that you got to download with your music, you'll want to refer to the music and see what you may need to do for that. When in doubt, ask the publisher what you need to do. Something that we've not talked about here are mechanical rights, which refer to the recording and creating of your CD type situation. It also, mechanical rights are coming into play with on-demand downloads of music. And so if that is something you wish to do, if you through your own website to have, if you want to host these videos on your website, or you want to host audio files on your website, you will need to license your website through a digital license or a website license directly from ASCAP or BMI. So if you're only doing music that is covered by ASCAP, then you only need one. But just like the blanket performance license, most of the music we play is covered by one or the other. So you'll want to look at that. And we have information on our copyright page and links to how to go about what you need for these digital licenses at both ASCAP and BMI. I think that's all of that. Next slide. So here are just some quick reference summary cards about the different copyrights for music, and these are available on our website. We've pretty much gone over most of what is in here. These are just some quick, what am I doing? What rights is covered by that? I thought I'd leave that up here for a little bit while we get into questions.
Wow, thank you, Sarah. That you have given us so many things to learn from and resources to use as we find our way through this new process of using virtual recordings. One of the questions, and perhaps you answered it, but I am going to ask it, excuse me, was, are the copyright rules the same for live and virtual? Are they the same in regards to still having to get licenses?
So whenever you do anything, there are licenses that come through. So like if you're playing out in the park and you're having a live concert, or if you've got 5 trombone players got together in someone's driveway to record and live stream, what's in that, in their driveway, if the that's a public performance. So you would need that blanket performance license or that public performance license. And then if you're live streaming it out to YouTube and Facebook, you're good as long as it's YouTube and Facebook. But if that video is then available later, then you need a synchronization license. And so that's something that, at first I hadn't thought too much about, but then I was at a copyright webinar with some people, and it was make sure if you're live streaming that you go and not make that video available after your concert, unless you went and got that synchronization right. So that's kind of 3 things there. There's the live performance of the people physically where you are, then the live stream through the internet, and then that video after the fact. And each of those are different.
Absolutely. Okay, well, that answers a couple questions actually that I was going to ask. And then this one, I don't know if it was answered. It says, what music can be put on Zoom, Facebook, House Party, YouTube apps? What license do we need for these?
Okay, so it depends what you're doing with it. There's not like a license for the platform. But so it kind of, it depends.
That answers it right there.
Yeah, it depends what you're doing. And
absolutely.
And Zoom is a platform. And so like if you're doing a public concert over Zoom which technologically is kind of hard to do, but there are some people who've experimented with that.
Sure.
That you need to go and talk to ASCAP or BMI, whoever owns that music, and say, how do I license that platform? Wonderful. And there are and you mentioned a whole bunch of apps there. ASCAP and BMI have agreements with different platforms. And so you need to ask them who they've licensed and who they haven't.
Okay, so they have to investigate everything on each side, which they're doing, investigating the music, the publisher, or how they are going to then stream it, whatever that may be. Right. Wonderful. Well, thank you. Are there any other questions from anyone? I don't see any. And you did answer the question. Oh, one of the things that was brought up, and maybe somebody saw it in the chat, was the question was to Tom Seaton, approximately the cost of licensing a virtual concert permission for that license. And Tom, do you want to talk to that, or shall I just give the answer?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I should put it in the chat too, so some of you probably already saw that. So far we've only been charged once. I think what we found, especially with Hal Leonard, is there's a place on Hal Leonard for licensing, and what they want you to do is they basically want you to put in who the publisher is, and then just the fact how you're going to be doing it. So they have a record of it, and so we've rarely heard back from them with anything. We did hear back from FJH for a piece that we just did, and once they found out what we were doing and everything, they said, we're going to charge you $25. And there was kind of a contract that you signed with that, but it was like, okay, that's pretty reasonable. So yeah, I think that's going to be, a lot how it is across the board. So
wonderful. And Sarah just put in that most bands who've reported to her, the fees ranged between 0 to 150, which just helps us get a range. There's no guarantees. You have to go through the process. So, okay. Right. Thank you, Tom, for answering that. Wonderful. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Going on to our third speaker. I apologize for looking like I was talking and wasn't. Scott is going to speak with us a little bit about the technical issues of getting started on a virtual project. Okay, Scott, thank you.
Hello. Yeah, so I am Scott Hosner. I want to thank you for the introduction back at the beginning of the presentation. So I do play the trombone with the Rancho Cordova River City Concert Band. But my hobbies are all centered around either 3D animation. I do music mixing, music performance. So things that all kind of fell into place when the pandemic started and we needed a way to get our music out. So the first thing we're going to be talking about today is how to create a click track. So this is the reference track that your musicians would be listening to while doing their recording so they can stay on tempo. And it just makes it easy to basically synchronize all of those recordings later when you want to make it sound like everybody's playing together. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and demonstrate creating one. Let's see. Okay, so first off, the software used for this. There are lots of different programs for editing audio. There's paid and there's free. The one that I use is absolutely free. It's called Audacity. It's pretty easy to use, especially for the purposes of doing the click tracks. So their website, audacityteam.org, would be where to go. But of course, if you already have someone who does their own audio editing, they have their own software, most of the principles that we'll show here will apply. So let me go ahead and switch this to Audacity. There we go. So when it's first opened, it's just a blank canvas. You can see there's a timeline across the top here. How you create your click track is going to depend on a couple of things. If you have a recording that you have permission to distribute to your band members, you can use that to overlay the basically the clicks and try to have that match up as best you can. You can even use this to kind of spread the clicks out if there's tempo changes or fermatos or things like that. But first, we're just going to take a look at just at its most basic, which is really just going to be, you need a clicking sound and maybe even some audio prompts. So I have a score from a piece that we did recently, not the score, but actually just my part. And the information I would need from that would basically just be how many measures are in that song and the tempo. So the piece that we're looking at, it was Albany Fanfare, had 85 measures total. And just again, looking at the music, you can see the numbered measures, and some parts have the numbers at the bottom of each one. So you might have to do some counting. The song was great because it was one tempo all the way through. So it was really easy to do the click track. So I know at this point I have 85 measures and I have a tempo somewhere between 132 and 138. So with Audacity, it's all broken down into tracks. Each instrument, each sound is going to be on its own track. So I'm going to make a new track, a new mono track, which has its own volume and stereo settings here that you can slide back and forth depending on how you want it to sound, left and right if you want to get fancy, but there's no need for that on the click track. Then you want to click within that track with the most basic tool, which is the selection tool. And there's only two tools that we'd be using for this. There's a selection tool and the time shift, which is for moving stuff forward and backward. So we've clicked in our track with our selection tool. Then we want to generate a rhythm track. And at first, this may look complicated. However, everything is labeled here and pretty much in musical terms. It's pretty easy to kind of intuit what you're looking for. So first off is just our strict tempo, how many beats per minute, which we said was 132 to 138. So I'll do this at 132. Beats per bar is our time signature. is it 4/4? Is it 4 beats per measure? Is it 2 beats per measure? Is it 5 beats per measure? So this particular song was in 3/4. So I'm going to do 3 beats per measure. And then the only other thing we need to look at is the number of bars, which again, I had said was 85. But we like to add 2 leading measures to help people get a sense of the tempo before they start playing. And you'll include instructions for that when you email it out, the instructions out to your band. So 87 total measures. And when I hit OK, it's going to generate this track. And so what you're seeing here, this is the waveform. This is what the sound is visualized as. And each one of these lines is a tick on the click track. And if I hit play, you'll see why we put it down as 3 beats per measure, because it'll do a loud tick at the beginning of each measure, which does help with that synchronization. So I'll hit play here and you'll hear what it sounds like. 1, 2, 3. So at its very most basic level, this is a click track. This could be sent to everyone if they all know what they're doing instruction wise. But it's good to have some verbal prompts to get people ready to go and to help synchronize it later. So I'm going to hold down the control button and I'm going to use my scroll wheel to kind of zoom this out so we can see the whole thing there. Then I mentioned there was that other tool, which is the time shift. And time shift, when you hold it over your track, it shows these little arrows, and you can just click and drag this earlier or later into the recording. So I like to give our musicians about 15 seconds before the song or the clicking actually starts. So I'm going to line it up with that 15 marker up there. And there's a question here: if I've arranged a piece to different instruments than the original, do I still need to get permissions? So I'll save that one for Sarah. So the most common way I've seen people do synchronization, and I've seen this with my daughter's middle school band, and we started doing it with our own bands, is to have a count off and then a clap or a snap, some kind of noise. And you want to have that fairly early in your time to avoid, say somebody with an instrument that they have to pick up and get ready, give them plenty of time to be ready and have their music ready. So with Audacity, you can select through these bars here what your devices are for recording. So my microphone is for recording, and then what you want your sound to come out of while you're recording, because as you record on Audacity, it's going to play whatever other tracks are happening, so that way you can get a sense of what's happening while you're recording. So I'll make sure that's on my headphones. And so just for example here, I'm going to put actually I'm going to make a new track because we don't want to overwrite the click track. So I'll do another add new mono track. And then I want to select in there. So this is going to be where any talking that I do goes. So hopefully this will work while I'm doing the Zoom meeting and doing this. So let's see if I can record this. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, clap. And so it recorded that. It'll play that in sequence. And then when it hits 15 seconds, it'll start the clicking. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, clap. And so that could be something that's done and ready to go out. However, we have started doing a little bit more narration in the video to give people more instruction on what to do when they start playing. So like for this one, or what we've been doing in our more recent recordings, would be something like this. There will be 2 measures of clicks before the song starts. When the clicking starts, raise your instrument. And what that does is when you go to do your video later on, you're going to have a moment where everybody raises their instruments all at the same time. And it's really good for presentation, and it gives you that performance feeling like you would have at a concert. So then from here we get this. 1, 2, 3, clap. There will be 2 measures of clicks before the song starts. When the clicking starts, raise your instrument. And there's the song. All right. So once you have all of this together and you're ready to put this out as an actual, either an MP3 file or a WAV file, probably MP3 because it's compressed, it's going to be easier to email. We're just going to go File, and you can save the project, which is going to save just the work that you have here. So I'm going to save this so I don't lose this in case I need to come back to it. And this kind of goes into a little bit of organization of your project from the very beginning. So you want to store your project, hopefully on whatever hard drive has the most space, or if you know much about it, which is the fastest hard drive to access, because a faster hard drive on the computer is going to make it, the project itself go smoother, because you're going to spend less time waiting for things to process and things like that. So these are all the band projects that we've done and other band projects that I have in work right now. I create a new folder for each one as they come up, and then start to create folders within that folder as the project progresses. So my first one was the click track, and I'm just going to call this my demo click track, and that's going to be the Audacity project file. And then for making this an actual releasable audio file, I'm going to select everything that I have here, and then I'm going to go to tracks, and at this point I want to mix it all into one track. So mix and render. And this gives us one audio track with our clicks and our narration. Then we can go back to File, and we're not going to save this. We're going to actually export this as our preferred audio file type. So in this case, MP3 or MPEG-3 is a great compressed audio format. And then since I've already saved my project in that demo, let's see, do you add audio cues in the pieces? Like, do you add audio cues to the middle of the piece, like calling out measure numbers periodically? Sometimes. It depends on the song, but sometimes we do. And you can do that using the same method I showed for recording. When you hit the record button in Audacity, I'm just going to change this back. So let's say right around here, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I would just hit record. You'll hear the clicks as it's going. 2, 3, 4. Measure 8. And you could do that through the whole song. If you have the score or the part, you absolutely could. And actually in a couple of ones that I've done recently, I've even gone to the very end and at the last note said, and keep your instruments up. And then after the song's done, and then lower your instruments. So again, that raise your instruments, lower your instruments all at the same time. So there's anything that you want to do for the for your project, for how it's going to sound, you can absolutely include those prompts. As far as removing something that you don't want, if you want to redo it, you just use that selection tool, and you can just drag right over the parts you don't want, and then hit delete on your keyboard, and then it drops it. So let's get this ready to go. So I selected both by holding down Control, or you can just do select all. Down to one track again, and then I'm going to export as MP3. And then I'm going to save this here. It'll ask you if you want to include tags, which would be things like the artist name, the track title, album title. You're welcome to include this details. It's things that would show up in their media player or on the device they're using to play the click track, which might be useful. Certainly not required. And then it's just going to kick that out. And to whatever folder you saved it to. And then from there, you would just attach that click track along with your recording instructions to an email and send it out to your band. Let's see. As far as recording instructions go, let me share this. An example of that, and there's more information available on this. Let me see, I want to make sure this is the right thing that's showing. Yeah, that was it. Okay, this would be an example of what the recording instructions might look like. But we are going to have some information. We actually have information on the ACB website that links to the Army Band and their tips and tricks for doing recording. But this is just one that we started using, basically telling people to have a copy of their part either printed or have it on a screen they can see it on. Make sure to listen to the click track, practice multiple times, describes the 2 devices needed, one to listen with headphones and one to record. Let's see, do a test run, avoid backlighting on your video, make sure you have light that's behind the camera so you're the one that's lit up. For brass players, trumpet, trombone, they can blow out a mic pretty quick if it's not a very high quality mic. So there's just some general instructions for having your horn at least 30 degrees away from the recording device. That way it's picking up the sound and not any overblowing audio. Alternately, if you have a decent recording mic for a PC, you can use that and adjust your levels to where it doesn't overblow it. I've run into a lot of issues with that with the trombone. You can't just put the bell right on the mic unless it's a certain type of microphone. Then there's instructions about the clap, and then recording, and then finally uploading, which we'll get to in just a moment. All right, so another possibility, and I mentioned this with the click track, is if you actually have a recording that you have permission to distribute as a reference recording. And for that, I'll go back to Audacity and I'll remove that. So what you would want to do is actually open that recording that you have that permission for. And I'm just going to put in, with Audacity is great because audio formats, you can just drag files right onto it. So I'll take this recording. I have reference recording of Albany Fanfare. And so it lays out the whole song here. And you can do the method I mentioned before with adding a new track, and then figure out what the exact tempo of your recording is. And this is a little more time intensive because, if your reference recording was done by a live group, there's going to be variations in that. But if it's a MIDI or a electronic recording, then it's going to be more dead on with what the listed tempo is. But you would just do those same things I mentioned here with your generating a rhythm track. But make sure you're selected on your track there. And so I'm just going to go with the settings I had before, 132, 87 bars. And it's going to generate that track. And this can take some trial and error. You may have to go through and actually count it and then do the math to figure out the exact tempo, because it may start off on time, but eventually it's going to get off beat if it's not one of those electronic recordings. But you just want to try to get it lined up as close as you can to the start of the song, giving those 2 lead measures. And then hopefully you get something pretty close. Yeah, so it's not quite on tempo, but again, with messing with those rhythm track settings, you can get it pretty close, and then even slide it back and forth a little bit to get it where you want it. Some of our earlier songs, when we didn't have good reference recordings, we would just do the first 4 measures or so into the song. That way we only had to worry about lining up those first 4 measures, and then delete everything after that and just have our musicians follow the reference recording as best they could. And that worked just fine, especially if it's a consistent tempo. So don't think you have to get too fancy and try to line up the entire song. It just really gets tricky when you have a song that has tempo changes if you're not using a conducting video. All right, any questions on creating the click track? I'll see, when I record the horn part, I drape a comforter over some furniture. Yes, that's very good. In band rooms, you notice they have either carpeted walls or they have those big pads on the walls for the purpose of absorbing echoes. So if you can drape something behind where the direction your horn is going to, that will give you a cleaner sound and reduce that echo. The only echo you're going to want is when you're doing your final audio production and you want to maybe add some reverberation or something to the whole group. That way it's nice and consistent. So that's a good tip. Let's see. All right, as far as creating a conductor video, if you already have your click track and you're conducting, all you really want to do is record yourself with the click track playing out loud so that everyone can hear it and see you. And then send that video out to your band either by email if it's small enough, or by putting it onto a communal Google Drive. Actually, what the thing I was going to talk about was putting it on YouTube as an unlisted video that you can send the link out to your group. So an example of that, let's see. Question. Unless the director track is downloaded, there will probably be a lag. It's possible, but YouTube is pretty consistent tempo-wise. The one time we used it because we had a song that was very musical, and had a lot of hits that weren't necessarily right on the beat. So it depends on the project whether that's something that you want to use. But I don't think it would be too much of a problem if it is on YouTube. But let's look at. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to put Tom on the spot here. And so he sent me this video. I didn't have to do any post-production on it or anything like that, other than when I was putting the video together, I just had to flip it because it was mirrored. You see his logo's backwards here. But you'll be able to hear, let me turn the volume up here. My voice on our click track. He's doing the clap there, so I can synchronize his video so it can be a part of the final project. And so he'll go through the whole song like that. And if you have a song that has changes in tempo, this would be a great way to do that. That way people can visually watch this on a tablet or PC while they're recording with the separate device. Okay, so let's see. Distributing music. So as far as getting the click track to people, the best way we found is really just sending it by email along with the instructions. Again, if you're using a recording or a song, there may be some permission considerations with that because you are emailing a copyrighted work to people. So that's why I would recommend the strict click track method, because there's no concerns with that. You've just set up the set number of measures and you've adjusted your speed on that. But just sending that out to your band along with the either a link to a conducting video or the recording instructions. So say you do want to go that YouTube route. Let me see, I have our YouTube channel here. It's fairly straightforward if you've never uploaded a video to YouTube before. Are most of your recordings done to a click track or to a demo track? We've been able to find demo tracks. So just about everything we've done, we've been able to use those. And then early on, before we were kind of hip to what the requirements were for that, we would just find the best recording we could on YouTube and then take the sound from that and then apply the clicks to it. But there are some issues with that that we're keen to avoid. Yeah, so if you've never uploaded a video to YouTube, if you have a Google account or a YouTube account, then you should have the ability to do that. Or if you have one set up for your band, you know, that's great. You'd just want to use your band's YouTube. But they have a couple ways of uploading videos. The simplest is just to hit this little create button up here and upload video. And then it's going to ask you to select files. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and drag that video of Tom right onto there. Give it a title. Fingers are cold, so I'm prone to typos. If there's any special instructions you want to give to your band members, you can certainly put it here in the description, but maybe include a disclaimer, you know, not for public use, do not share, something along those lines, just so your people know not to share it with their friends or people not related to the project. Let's see, we're at 10%, so it does take a little while to actually upload. YouTube has a disclaimer about videos made for kids it's a law called COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So every video upload, you have to specify whether this video is made specifically for children or not. This, if you say no, which we've done for our videos, it's not going to put a mature label on your video. It just means it's not going to pop up in the feed for children's programming. So I would certainly advise to use no for that. Unless you're recording something specifically for children or a child audience, then you'd want to familiarize yourself with that Children's Online Privacy Protection Act before doing so. There are more options you can do, but there's nothing that's really needed for this part of the process. If we're just getting a video out to our band members, we're going to focus on visibility, and we're going to make sure that it's listed as private. Once the video finishes uploading, which it's going to do here, it'll do in the background, but it's best to just leave this up until it's done. You can then open that video and get the address from it to include in your instruction email. Question here, do you recommend that a player record a separate audio track that would later be matched to the player's video track, such as an audio track recorded via Audacity might sound better? That's certainly an option. So we have people in our band of varying levels of, you know, not just musicianship, but also technical savvy. So we do have a few of our band members who regularly submit a separate WAV file of just their audio recording, which will be nice and crisp and clean. Maybe, you know, we have one guy who actually goes to a studio and has it engineered so it comes in just sounding really good. And then he submits a video later, basically just playing along to it. So then that gets matched up in the later process. I would say even for that though, play along on that video so that it's easier to synchronize. But again, the clapping should handle that. So it's kind of up to preference. Let's see. Yeah, so we don't need to wait for this whole thing. So I'll just pull up a video that we have on here. Well, say you have your video uploaded and you just want to get the link to share. You can just click on it here where it says view on YouTube. And you can either copy the address directly from the top here, or if you do share.
In honor of Black History Month, the Rancho Cordova River City.
Share, and then you can share it by email, or you got the link right here. You can just hit copy, and that's what you want to paste into your email. Okay, so I've got distributing music, distributing the Conductor video, collecting recordings. So at this point, it's out there. You're waiting for everyone to record. Hopefully you've given them a reasonable deadline to practice and record and get it back to you. If someone is sending you their video from a Gmail, Google makes it easy taking files that are over 25 megabytes, which are usually a problem for email, and it'll actually prompt you and say, this file's too big. Would you like to share it through Google Drive? In which case, if you say yes, it uploads it to your own Google Drive and then sends whoever's working on it a link to that video. That works really well. For people who are not using Gmail or Google, any other email really, it's just a matter of having your band's Google Drive, which if you have a Gmail account, you have a Google Drive. It's just a matter of knowing where to click to get to it. So let me pull that up real quick here. So if you're on Google, you're logged in as your band. Google has all of these little apps up here, and you're just looking for Drive. It'll be this multicolored triangle here. So you have your Drive. You would want to create a folder within your Drive for the project. And if necessary, you could even right-click and create subfolders for maybe different aspects of a project or multiple projects. And then once you have your file structure in place, you have the folder up that you want to share out, you can actually just click on this little down arrow here and say, get a link. And it will generate a link to this drive. And if you say that anyone with the link can access it, you can send that link in your email as well. That way, when your band members click on that link in the email, they'll be brought right here, right to your folder where you're ready to receive their videos. This can also be done on mobile. It brings up a similar mobile version of the website, or even the mobile app if somebody's doing it from an Android phone. And they're just going to click New, File Upload. And then they're going to need to navigate to wherever that video is stored. Let's see, here's and then that will upload the video to the drive, making it accessible to the person working on the project. Anybody in the band would be able to see it if it's up there, if they have access to this folder. But whoever's working on it, they're going to want to grab those and just download them as soon as they appear, because it's also going to depend on how much space you have on your Google Drive. And I think the free account comes with 15 gigabytes, but you can upgrade your subscription to more depending on the size of your band and how much you're expecting to receive.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
This is Gail. And
Yes, Gail.
we're just kind of looking at time here with the idea that I know you're going to be back next week to give us even more details on what we're doing.
That's
and
right.
So I will give you a minute to finish up perhaps what you were thinking, and then we can move forward.
Yeah, so actually that was great timing, because that's actually kind of the last thing I wanted to go over was getting those videos to you, because the next session we're going to go over what to do with those videos once you have them.
Okay.
So there are plenty of methods for sending files over the internet, but the Google Drive seems to be one of the easier ones. There's also Microsoft OneDrive and Apple iCloud, which we've used all three in the past. But if you can get everybody onto one platform, it's a lot easier.
Wonderful. Wow. You gave us so many things to start thinking about if we haven't started already doing some of these things, and giving us ideas to look at what is really being done if you've got someone else in your group doing it. So thank you so very, very much. So we'd like to now go back to our wonderful president of ACB, and this is Susan Sands.
Thank you for being with us for today's session of ACB Connects. On behalf of the Association of Concert Bands, I would like to extend a huge thank you to today's presenters, Tom Seaton, Sarah Mcelfresh, and Scott Hosner, who have generously shared their wonderful experiences, knowledge, and insights for embarking on a virtual project. Also, a special thank you to our moderator, Gail Brechting, and to the entire ACB Connects production team. This multi-session series of ACB Connects, with a focus on virtual collaborations, will continue during the next 2 months with sessions on creating a video product to share with your audience, recommendations from the U.S. Army Field Band, and a discussion with ACB directors on creative ways to bring live concerts to audiences during these times of social distancing. The second session of this series will be next Sunday, March 14th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. In this session, virtual concerts, nuts and bolts of video production, the topics addressed will relate to the technical production, software, and release issues. So a lot more coming from Scott. Please check the ACB website for registration, information, and for additional details. Every year, ACB holds an informational meeting for the entire membership of the association. Usually this happens at the National Convention, but this year it will be a virtual event hosted by the ACB Connects production team on Sunday, April 25th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Every ACB member, individual, life, family, student, corporate, and organization member is invited to attend. This invitation also extends to everyone who belongs to an ACB member band. During this session, there'll be time for greeting your friends from across the country and from around the world. There'll be a showcase of bands where you can catch up with other member bands. If you would like to have your band included in this showcase, please submit a photo and a brief statement about your band to the ACB editor. Details for submission can be found in the email that was sent to all ACB members on Friday and on the ACB website. During this meeting segment, you'll hear from our current officers and board members. You'll witness the new president, Gail Brechting, the new president-elect, Beth Steele, and new board members, Michael Birch-Pesses, Larry Lang, and Tom Seaton, as they take their oaths of office. To complete the program, awards will be presented. We'll hear from the Santa Fe, New Mexico 2022 Convention Committee, and we'll welcome a special inspiring guest speaker. Be sure to mark your calendars to save the date for this special event that you won't want to miss. For the links mentioned in today's session and to access all previously recorded sessions of ACB Connects, please visit our ACB website homepage at acbands.org. You'll also find information about becoming an ACB member, details on future sessions of ACB Connects, and a wealth of resources for anyone who plays in a band or would like to find a band. Thank you so much for being with us today for this special opportunity to form new connections. We'll look forward to seeing you again at ACB Connects next Sunday, March 14th, as the series on virtual collaborations continues. Until then, take care and be safe.